For years, I've been telling people there are a lot of people in the world that you've encountered them in meetings. They're the kind of people that no matter what the speaker has said or the teacher has said or the trainer has said or the boss has said, they just can't contain themselves from blurting out some fact or truth or knowledge or wisdom or understanding that they have all on their own. They just have to say something. And then there are those people that are more like my wife who you got to squeeze her really hard. You got to put her under a lot of pressure. You've got to really almost intimidate her to get words to come out of her. But when they do, they're usually deep and profound. I remember writing a poem almost 30 years ago called The Velvet Stone. Soft to the touch, solid on the inside. That's much more like my wife, like many of those people who are very quiet until they can't be anymore. Welcome to Leading Leaders Podcast, 5-minute videos, 5 days a week. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. I know that in the years that I've been training public speakers, a lot of the people that I run into, well, they want me to teach them to write the speech that sells. Oh, there are hundreds and thousands of people out there who will help you write the speech that sells. They have the perfect formula. They have exactly the right time to add in all the characters and all the elements of the plot, etc., and the ways to get the manipulative emotional response that you want to the story so that you can sell that speech again and again and again. And every time you rehearse it and practice it, it will be something spectacular and even more spectacular every time you rehearse it. And for those people who just have to say something, that's a great practice. I also recommend that you join Toastmasters. Get involved in a local community where people want to hear you speak, where you can get more polished and more practice at that thing that you love to do, which is to talk. It's part of the reason I do this, because I love to talk. Because one of the ways that I process thought and new information is that I talk. Not because I love to hear myself speak, but because I know that those thoughts coming out of my mouth, they've gone through my head and gone through a filter and they come from my heart. But I have to take the disciplined time to manage those words before I just throw them out there. For those of you who have that same process, that same way of thinking, and feel like you've been given words that others need to hear, get a coach who can help you write that process. And let me say that both ways. To write that process, as in W-R-I-T-E, to write it out, to go through the process of collecting your thoughts, collecting your words, synthesizing your words, coming to the meaning that's going to resonate best with the audience you're going to share it with. But I also mean write, as in R-I-G-H-T, to correct, to modify, to redirect, like writing a ship. Might be that it's listing a little bit to one side or another, or it's turn to the starboard or to the port bow, and then you need to get the nose of it going in the right direction in order to navigate the value of what you have to say. So get a coach, get a trainer, get involved in Toastmasters or some other public speaking group for that purpose, and get your words into a rhythm that is correct, that is articulate, that is powerful. But I also want to speak to those who, well, they don't have a desire to get up and say something. They don't have a passion for speaking in public or sharing their ideas, but they have something of deep value to share. They have life experiences that no one else has experienced. They have eyewitness testimony to events and circumstances and emotional relationships that no one else could even begin to comprehend. One of the things that really breaks my heart is when I hear someone who has been silent all of their life, and then they finally speak up and everybody around them is like, I didn't even know. Listen, you have a story in your life. And some of that story, hear me closely, some of that story could change the world. Some of that story, if told, would change you. Some of that story, if you just took the time to express it, you would hear yourself and go, I'm not even sure I believe that anymore. I lived through the moment. I experienced the pain, but I've let it go. I've forgiven. I've moved on with my life. I don't hold the same bitterness or hatred that I did back then. Or maybe you'll find that you've experienced some magical transformation in your own life. That if you took that knowledge, that wisdom, and that experience and you gave it to others through the power of your story, you could save a life. And for that reason, you need to speak up. I know there are a lot of people who are terrified to speak up. Maybe they're terrified that they'll say the wrong thing. Maybe they're terrified that what they have to say is not important to anybody else because they've never shared it and heard the response or seen the facial responses of people who said, I resonate with that story. I get it. I've been there. I know exactly what you went through. It was my story too. In fact, there may be those that when you share that story, even though you're terrified to share it, the minute you do, other people go, I needed to hear that because I need to share my story because my story is the same as yours. I'm a very transparent person, and I've had no problem for years to be able to say I was molested at 9 years old. And being molested as a male is hard enough to be able to cope with and to put out there. Most people kind of back up a little bit when they hear you say that. But when I say that it led to early exposure to sexuality and 25 years of addiction to pornography and sexuality, guys that have experienced that kind of hide in the corner like he's going to reveal me. Until the cameras are off and nobody's looking anymore. And then they come and they say, I'm glad you had the courage to say that because I never could, but I felt alone most of my life. Look, politically speaking, religiously speaking, socially speaking, culturally speaking, there are opportunities to express yourself all over the place. There are social media venues that's their entire purpose. But if you don't have the courage to do that in front of one person or 100 people or 1,000 people, then your story may never be heard. My challenge to you as a leadership principle is to understand the difference. Which of those two camps do you find yourself in? You truly have something to say that the world needs to hear that will add value to people's life, even if you're terrified to share it? Or you just have to say something because you cannot remain silent anymore, but you need help organizing those words? Whichever of those two camps you find yourself in, speak up. Whichever of those two camps you find yourself in, there are coaches like myself, leadership coaches, communications coaches, speech coaches, platform coaches, media coaches, who will walk you through the process, who will be glad to answer the questions that you have, who will be glad to challenge you in the words that you want to say, who will be glad to dive deep into who you are and what you mean by what you say, to help you be more articulate. But even if you don't go that path, speak up. Take the time, find the platform, social media platform, hiding in your closet with just you and your iPhone, or standing on a stage in front of thousands. But speak up. Because we're living in a world where things are changing so fast, it may not be much longer that you won't have the right to speak up. And what you've lived through, what you've experienced, what you've learned in those experiences is of deep value. History is being rewritten, society is being transformed, culture is being erased. And as that happens, we will lose touch with what we've lived through. I want you to be one of those that years from now, generations from now, people look back and go, I remember when so-and-so said this, and it changed the way I perceive things in life. Because you have a unique position, a unique experience, and a unique story that no one else can question, that no one else can doubt, that no one else can share. But I don't have your experiences. I'll be glad to help you tell your story better, but I want you to tell your story good, better, or best. Just speak up. When leaders don't give people an opportunity to speak up, when they silence them, it's usually because they're afraid of the story. They're afraid that if they're heard, that it will change things. It might loosen their grip on power or loosen their ability to control. Leaders who don't want you to speak up have a reason and a value in your silence. So my challenge to you is speak up. Let your voice be heard. Tell your story anywhere, everywhere, whenever you can. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.